How can 5 men disappear without a trace, leaving behind a working car, scattered bodies, and one still missing? What started as a trip to a basketball game became one of America's most chilling mysteries. The strange case of the Yuba County Five still baffles investigators and haunts the families of those involved. Before we jump in, a quick warning. Some details in this story are unsettling and might not be suitable for everyone. Viewer discretion is advised. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Now let's get started. In February 1978, 5 men from Yuba City, California, went missing in one of the strangest cases ever recorded. Their names were Gary Mathias, Ted Wire, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jack Hewitt. They were known around town as friendly, harmless, and deeply loyal to one another. They had big dreams and were excited about their future. What happened to them has left people guessing for over 40 years. The group had driven to Chico, California, on February 24th to watch a college basketball game. They planned to return home right after the game because they had their own basketball tournament the next day. It was an important match, and they had been talking about it for weeks. But instead of heading home, they drove deep into the mountains and vanished. Gary Mathias was 25 years old and the most unpredictable member of the group. He had been diagnosed with schizophrenia after serving in the Army. While he struggled with mental health issues, he had been doing better in recent years. Medication helped him stay balanced, and he spent a lot of time with his friends. Gary was street smart and knew how to handle himself in tough situations. Unlike the others, he did not have a developmental disability. This made him different from the group, but it also meant he often looked out for them. He had a strong bond with Jack Madruga and treated the others like family. Ted Wire was 32 years old and the tallest in the group. He was always smiling and had a warm personality. People in the neighborhood liked him because he was polite and easy to talk to. Ted had a mild intellectual disability, but it never slowed him down. He worked odd jobs and took care of his younger siblings. He loved sports, especially basketball. Ted was the kind of person who always cheered the loudest for his friends and celebrated every victory like it was a championship win. Jack Madruga was 30 years old and a natural leader. He had served in the Army and was proud of his time in the military. Jack was responsible and careful about everything he did. He also had a strong sense of direction and never liked taking risks. Jack owned the car they were driving that night. It was a turquoise Mercury Montego, and he treated it like his baby. Friends said he never let anyone else drive it, and he hated going off-road. The fact that his car was found abandoned on a rough dirt road made the case even stranger. Bill Sterling was 29 years old and the quietest in the group. He had a soft heart and liked helping others. He often volunteered to read books to patients in hospitals and spent time with older people who felt lonely. Bill and Ted Wire were best friends. They were almost always together and had similar personalities. Both were gentle and trusting, which made people worry they might have been easy targets if someone tried to take advantage of them. Jack Hewitt was only 24 years old and the baby of the group. He was shy and often looked up to his friends for guidance. Jack had a slight learning disability and depended on the others to help him make decisions. Even though he was quiet, Jack had big dreams. He loved playing basketball and felt proud to be part of the team. Jack also collected comic books and had a playful side that made his... What brought these 5 men together was their love for basketball and their need for a place to belong. They played for the Gateway Gators, a basketball team for people with disabilities. It was more than just a team. It gave them confidence, goals, and a reason to stick together. Basketball kept them focused and gave them something to look forward to. They took every game seriously and practiced often. Their excitement for the upcoming tournament was proof of how much it meant to them. On the night they disappeared, the 5 friends were in high spirits. They had just watched UC Davis beat Chico State and were probably talking about their own big game the next day. They even stopped at a convenience store for snacks before heading out. Nobody knows why they didn't drive straight home. Their route should have taken them south, but their car was found northeast, deep in the mountains. It was in perfect condition and not stuck, but the men were gone. It was supposed to be a fun night out before their own big game the next day. Gary Mathias, Ted Wire, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jack Hewitt were excited. They had been talking about their tournament for weeks and had packed their gear in advance. They drove Jack Madruga's turquoise Mercury Montego, which he kept in perfect condition. He didn't let anyone else drive it, and he never took it on dirt roads. Jack was careful about where he went. He also hated getting lost, so he always stuck to familiar routes. The group drove north to Chico, about an hour away, to watch UC Davis play Chico State. They left in the late afternoon and made it to the game without any problems. Witnesses later said they were in high spirits, laughing and enjoying themselves. Nothing seemed unusual. The game ended around 10 p.m., and UC Davis won. The 5 men stayed until the end, cheered loudly, and then left the arena. They didn't stick around to talk to anyone. They had an early morning ahead and knew they needed rest. At this point, everything about the night still seemed normal. They had plans for the next day and were ready to go home. But instead of heading south toward Yuba City, they somehow ended up deep in the mountains, miles away from the route. Before leaving Chico, they made a quick stop at Bear's Market. It was a small convenience store that was about to close. They bought a few snacks, including Hostess pies, candy bars, and milk. The clerk remembered them clearly. She said they seemed happy and normal. They joked around and paid for their food without acting strange or nervous. That detail made their later disappearance even harder to explain. They had just bought snacks for the ride home. They were getting ready for bed and an early start. Nothing about their behavior suggested they had any other plans. Instead of taking the highway home, their car was found abandoned on a rugged mountain road about 70 miles away. The area was remote, covered in snow, and far off the path they should have been on. Jack Madruga's car was in good condition. It wasn't stuck and it had enough gas to keep going. The keys were missing, but the doors were locked. Inside, police found wrappers from the snacks they bought and programs from the basketball game. The car showed no signs of trouble, but there was no explanation for why it was there. Jack hated rough roads and would never have willingly driven into the mountains. During the investigation, a man named Joseph Shones came forward with an eerie account. On the same night the men disappeared, Shones had driven up the same mountain road. His car got stuck in the snow, and while trying to free it, he started having chest pains. While trying to free his car, he had a mild heart attack and had to rest. Around 11:30 p.m., he saw headlights coming toward him. He thought it was another car and tried to flag it down. Instead, he saw a group of people, including what looked like a woman holding a baby. Joseph called out for help, but the lights went out. The figures disappeared into the night, leaving him stranded. He later admitted he might have been disoriented because of his condition, but his story raised even more questions. When the men didn't show up for their basketball tournament the next morning, their families panicked. They immediately called the police. Search teams combed through the area where the car was found. They checked nearby trails, cabins, and even frozen streams, but there was no sign of the group. Helicopters flew overhead, and volunteers searched on foot. But days passed without any clues. As investigators dug deeper, the timeline of events became even stranger. None of the men had packed warm clothes for the trip, which ruled out the idea that they had planned to camp or hike. They also had no history of reckless behavior. All 5 were careful planners who liked routines. Jack Madruga was especially cautious. He never took unfamiliar roads and would have turned around if he felt lost. There was also no reason to think they were trying to run away. They had left their wallets, money, and personal belongings at home. Their excitement for the basketball tournament the next day made it clear they had no plans to disappear. discovery of Jack Madruga's 1969 Mercury Montego was the first solid clue in the baffling disappearance of the Yuba County Five. It was found abandoned on a desolate mountain road in the Plumas National Forest, far from their expected route. Instead of solving the mystery, the car raised more questions about what really happened that night. The car was located 70 miles from Chico and 35 miles from Yuba City. It sat on a dirt road near Rogers Cow Camp, surrounded by thick forest and snow. The area was rugged and isolated, with narrow, winding roads leading up the mountain. This route made no sense. The group had no reason to be in such a remote place, especially at night. Jack Madruga, the car's owner, was careful and avoided unfamiliar roads. He hated rough terrain and preferred paved highways. Yet his car ended up far from any logical path home. The Mercury Montego was in excellent shape. It wasn't stuck in the snow, and the tires showed no signs of slipping. It still had fuel, and the engine started without problems when investigators tested it. Inside, they found snack wrappers, milk cartons, and basketball programs from the game the men had attended. The car keys were missing, and the doors were locked, but there was nothing to suggest a struggle. The car's condition made it clear the group hadn't been forced off the road. It looked like they had stopped voluntarily. Yet there was no logical reason for 5 men to leave a warm car and walk into freezing temperatures without supplies. The group hadn't packed warm clothes or survival gear. They were dressed for a short drive, not for freezing mountain weather. If they had gotten lost, the logical decision would have been to stay in the car, where they could have kept warm and waited for help. Jack Madruga was known for being protective of his car and disliked walking long distances. Friends said he would never leave his vehicle without a good reason. Despite all these facts, the men abandoned the car and vanished. When the car was found, search teams quickly began combing the area. They checked trails, cabins, and frozen streams. Helicopters scanned from above, and volunteers searched on foot. Tracking dogs were brought in, but the snow made it impossible to follow any scents. The terrain made the search even harder. Snowdrifts covered paths, and freezing temperatures slowed down the rescue efforts. Every lead turned up empty, leaving searchers frustrated and families desperate for answers. The weather made the search extremely difficult. Heavy snow covered any tracks the group might have left, and the rough roads slowed down vehicles and equipment. Searchers also had to check abandoned cabins and trailers scattered throughout the area. They feared the men might have taken shelter somewhere, but were too weak or injured to call for help. Despite weeks of searching, no one found any trace of the 5 men. The car remained the only physical evidence in the case, but it gave no answers. The abandoned car created more confusion than clarity. Investigators couldn't explain why the men had driven so far off course. They had no reason to be in the mountains, especially late at night and in freezing weather. Jack Madruga's cautious personality made it even harder to believe he would take such a dangerous route. He knew his car wasn't built for rough terrain, yet it was found deep in the forest. The fact that the car was in perfect condition ruled out mechanical failure. It wasn't stuck, and it had enough gas to keep going. The group had snacks and a map, but they never used them. Even stranger, they locked the doors and took the keys as if planning to return, but they never came back. Months after the Yuba County Five vanished, searchers finally uncovered their fate in the remote wilderness. What they found was shocking and heartbreaking. Scattered remains, frozen bodies, and unexplained clues painted a picture of survival and fear. The discovery raised more questions than answers and left one man's disappearance unsolved. On June 4, 1978, 4 months after the men disappeared, searchers found Ted Wyer's body inside an abandoned Forest Service trailer. The trailer sat 19 miles from where the car had been left. It was part of a campground in the Plumas National Forest, surrounded by thick trees and snow-covered trails. Ted's body lay on a bed wrapped in 8 sheets. It looked like someone had tried to keep him warm. His feet were frostbitten so badly that his toes had turned black. He had lost nearly half his body weight, dropping to around 100 pounds. Investigators believed he had survived for weeks, possibly up to 2 months, before finally starving to death. The trailer itself had supplies that could have kept him alive. Shelves were stocked with canned food, enough to last several men for weeks. The trailer also had matches, books, and furniture that could have been burned for heat. But none of the resources had been fully used. Only a dozen cans of food had been opened, and there was no sign Ted had tried to light the propane tank outside, which could have provided heat. The group had also left behind heavy clothing and tools that could have helped them survive longer. Even stranger, Gary Mathias's shoes were found in the trailer. Ted's own shoes were missing. This hinted that Gary had been there too, and possibly left wearing Ted's shoes. Ted's body showed signs that he had tried to stay alive as long as he could. He had wrapped himself in sheets and blankets, likely trying to fight off the cold. His beard had grown long, and investigators believed he had been alive for weeks after the others were gone. A gold watch and a candle were found near him. Cans of food had been opened with sharp tools, even though a can opener was sitting in a drawer nearby. The untouched supplies confused investigators. They couldn't explain why Ted didn't use more food or light the stove to keep warm. He had resources around him but seemed unable or unwilling to use them. Search teams expanded their efforts after finding Ted, and more gruesome discoveries followed. Jack Madruga's body was found first, about 11 miles from the abandoned car. He lay face up, partially eaten by animals. He still had the keys to the car in his pocket. His position suggested he had collapsed while walking toward safety. Bill Sterling's remains were nearby, but only bones were left. Animals had scattered his body, making it hard to piece together what happened to him. Jack Hewitt's bones were found 2 miles from the trailer. Searchers identified him by his skull and backbone. His remains were also spread out, likely disturbed by animals. Investigators believed all 3 men had died from exposure, freezing to death in the harsh weather. Their bodies were found at different locations, suggesting they had split up while trying to find help. The scattered positions raised disturbing questions. Why didn't they stick together? Why didn't they turn back to the car instead of wandering deeper into the mountains? Gary Mathias's disappearance remains the biggest mystery. His shoes were in the trailer, but there was no sign of his body. Searchers combed the area for miles, but he was never found. Gary had a history of mental health problems but had been managing his condition with medication before the trip. Some thought he might have wandered away in confusion or had a breakdown in the cold. Others believed he may have survived and chosen to disappear. Without evidence, theories about Gary's fate have continued for decades. His name is still listed as missing, and his disappearance remains open. The discovery of the bodies left investigators with more questions than explanations. The men left a working car and walked into the snow without warm clothes or supplies. Ted Wire made it to the trailer, but he starved to death surrounded by food and tools. The scattered remains of the others showed they died trying to escape the cold, but no one could explain why they were there in the first place. Gary Mathias disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only his shoes and endless speculation. The disappearance and tragic deaths of the Yuba County Five have sparked endless theories. Investigators and armchair detectives alike have struggled to make sense of the bizarre clues left behind. One theory is that the group simply got lost. They may have taken a wrong turn after leaving Chico and ended up deep in the mountains. Snow-covered roads and darkness could have confused them, leaving them stranded. But this idea doesn't explain why they abandoned a working car or why Ted Wire made it 19 miles to a trailer. The route to the trailer wasn't a straight path, making it hard to believe they stumbled upon it by accident. Some believe foul play was involved. The men may have been forced off the road or lured into the mountains. The sighting of a woman and baby with the group added fuel to these suspicions. However, no evidence of violence or struggle was found in the car or on the bodies. Gary Mathias's schizophrenia has led to speculation about irrational behavior. He may have panicked and led the group deeper into the wilderness. Others suggest group fear or confusion caused them to split up instead of staying with the car. Experts have pointed to hypothermia as a factor, which can cause disorientation and strange behavior. Yet the discovery of supplies left unused in the trailer remains baffling. With so many questions unanswered, the case continues to defy explanation, keeping the story alive decades later. The disappearance of the Yuba County Five shocked their families and left their community searching for answers. When their bodies were finally discovered, the case grew even darker. The strange details drew national attention, and theories spread like wildfire. At first, the disappearance of the five men seemed like a case of them just getting lost. Local news covered it as a search and rescue story, and people expected the men to be found quickly. But when searchers located the abandoned car in the mountains, the tone shifted. The media began focusing on the eerie details, and the public started asking tough questions. The families pushed for more answers. Flyers went up and volunteers joined the search. Everyone wanted to know how five friends could vanish after something as simple as a basketball game. For the families, the weight was unbearable. They couldn't understand why the search kept coming up empty. With no solid leads, frustration grew, and the mystery deepened. The strange circumstances of the Yuba County Five made it a natural fit for true crime media. Over the years, the case has been featured in TV shows, podcasts, and documentaries. Programs like Unsolved Mysteries covered the case, highlighting the chilling details and creating new interest. Podcasts have dove into every theory, from mental breakdowns to government conspiracies. Online forums are filled with amateur sleuths trying to connect the dots. Documentaries have focused on the human side of the tragedy, sharing the hopes and struggles of the men's families. These shows and discussions have kept the case in the spotlight. New listeners and viewers often come away with fresh ideas, adding more theories to the mix. Some believe the group was running from something. Others think they were led there by someone they trusted. The Yuba County Five became more than just a local story. It became a symbol of how ordinary events can take terrifying turns, leaving behind mysteries that refuse to be solved. For the families, the loss was devastating. They went from planning a basketball celebration to organizing funerals and searches. Ted Wyer's mother couldn't understand why her son would leave the car and walk into the snow. Gary Mathias's stepfather believed Gary might still be alive, holding on to hope even as the years passed. The community also changed. Parents became more protective, especially those with children who had disabilities. Many felt uneasy about letting their loved ones travel without supervision. The families struggled with the way the case was portrayed. Media coverage often focused on their disabilities, leading to harmful assumptions. Some articles made it seem like the men were helpless or easily manipulated, but their families fought to show that wasn't true. Even with the spotlight, the case left the families feeling abandoned. Leads dried up, and investigators moved on. For the parents and siblings, the pain never faded. They wanted closure, but the mystery only deepened. The lack of evidence has made it hard for investigators to follow leads. The scattered remains and the long timeline have also made it difficult to piece together what really happened. Still, some believe the case can be solved. Advances in technology and renewed interest may one day reveal the truth. Families continue to hope for closure, and the public refuses to let the story fade away. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, then check out these videos on the screen now. If you have a topic suggestion, please send it to the email in the description. And as always, remember to like, comment, share the video, and subscribe to our channel. And remember, the only thing scarier than this story is missing out on our next video.